My name is Ethan, I'm 44 years old, and I've spent more than a decade driving an 18-wheeler across the highways of the United States. When my marriage fell apart, I decided not to stay put but instead hit the road. With my rig as my traveling companion, I found a sense of solitude that, strangely enough, felt comforting. I've always loved the freedom of the open road, crossing state lines, watching the landscape shift with each mile, and seeing the sun rise in one place only to set in another. Especially at night, when the traffic thins out and there's only the steady hum of the engine for company. It's during these long, quiet hours that I feel most at peace, with the darkness stretching out around me like a familiar blanket. After my divorce, it was easier to avoid the idea of settling down again. My ex-wife always told me I had a restless spirit, that I never truly belonged anywhere. I suppose she had a point. I've crisscrossed countless highways, frequented truck stops that most folks wouldn't even notice, and met people who came and went without leaving a lasting trace. Yet, despite the miles and the time, there was something about this lifestyle that I held on to fiercely. Sure, I've had my share of brief encounters over the years. The road, after all, brings you into contact with people from all walks of life, and sometimes sparks fly. But I never felt anything that truly got under my skin, at least not until one particular night. It was close to midnight when I pulled into a rest area on the outskirts of Kansas City. My eyelids were heavy, but I wasn't quite ready to sleep. I decided to park and head into the small diner there for a coffee and maybe something to eat. The place had that predictable neon sign flickering above the entrance, a sure indicator that the coffee would be strong and the food just greasy enough to be comforting. I pushed the door open, and that's when I saw him. Tall, short brown hair peppered with a bit of gray, and a hint of a smirk on his face that caught my attention immediately. He was stepping out of the diner, a steaming cup of coffee in hand. Our eyes met for a few seconds, just long enough for me to feel my pulse quicken, and then he flashed a subtle smile. It was such a simple gesture, but it felt like a jolt of electricity in the middle of that quiet night. He paused as though he was thinking about saying something, gave me a slight nod, and then continued out into the parking lot. I stood there for a few moments trying to make sense of the quick wave of attraction that had just washed over me. Finally, I snapped out of it and went to the counter to order my coffee and a sandwich. The whole time I waited, I couldn't get him off my mind. It was an odd feeling, like something had clicked even though we'd hardly exchanged a glance. When my order was finally ready, I hurried outside, pretending I just wanted to eat in my truck. But if I'm honest, I was really hoping to spot him again. Sure enough, he was leaning against the side of a shiny rig, staring out into the darkness. The posture, the way he held himself, it all spoke of a quiet confidence. With my heart pounding, I mustered the courage to walk over. Headed north? I asked, trying my best to sound casual. He turned to me with a small chuckle, his hazel eyes glinting in the faint glow of the overhead lights. Actually, I'm going west, he replied. But not tonight. I'm too worn out, so I'm staying here till morning. I extended my hand. I'm Ethan. He shook it firmly. Zach, he said. In that handshake, I felt warmth course between us, something hard to describe but impossible to ignore. For a moment, neither of us spoke. We just stood there as if the silence was more meaningful than words could convey. Eventually, we started talking, swapping stories about long hauls, quirky diners with the same menu plastered on the walls, and all those lonely stretches of highway that somehow become a second home. But in the back of my mind, I kept thinking about how easily we'd fallen into this conversation, as if we'd known each other far longer. After a while, Zach's expression shifted into something more thoughtful. He lowered his voice just a touch. You know, he said, studying my face, when I passed by you in there, I kind of wanted to stick around and see who you were. His honesty took me by surprise and I felt my heart jump. In truth, I'd felt the same spark, but hearing him say it out loud caught me off guard. Funny, I was thinking the same thing, I admitted, my voice slightly unsteady. He laughed softly and the tension in the air crackled. We locked eyes and for a moment time seemed to stop. Then, Zach closed the distance between us so close I could feel his breath against my cheek. With gentle confidence, he placed a hand on my hip and leaned in for a kiss. It was soft and urgent all at once, like an exhale after holding your breath for too long. I could taste the faint bitterness of coffee on his lips, and the warmth of his body against mine made my nerves buzz with adrenaline. Part of me couldn't believe I was doing this, kissing a stranger in the middle of a rest stop parking lot, but another part felt more alive than I had in ages. "Come to my truck," he murmured, his forehead against mine. I didn't hesitate. We climbed into his cab, which was surprisingly neat and more spacious than I'd expected. The moment the door shut behind us, the energy between us intensified. Zach pulled me close, and we traded a series of heated kisses as we fumbled with zippers and shirts, letting them fall wherever they landed. In that cramped space, it felt like there was nothing else in the world but the two of us and the urgent need to explore every inch of each other. I won't go into explicit details, but suffice it to say, we surrendered to the magnetic pull we both felt. The heat of his skin, the sound of his breath, the way our bodies fit together, it all seemed too perfect to be real. For a while, I forgot everything else. My failed marriage, the countless miles of empty highway, and the nights spent alone in truck stops. Afterwards we lay there, arms and legs tangled. The night air slipped through a small vent, cooling the cab just enough to remind me that the rest of the world still existed. Yet, wrapped up in Zach's embrace, I felt a rare sense of calm. Dawn found us awake, the soft early light shining through the windshield. For a moment we just looked at each other in silence. I caught myself smiling at the way the sun highlighted the slight silver in his hair. "What's on your mind?" Zach asked, brushing his hand lightly along my arm. "How quickly life can change," I said, my voice still groggy with sleep. "Last night I was just another guy in a diner. Now I'm here wishing time would stand still." He smiled, a warm, genuine grin, and traced a finger over my cheek. "Any chance you can stay a bit longer?" "I do have a schedule, but maybe I can push it back," I replied. A couple of messages later, I managed to shift a few deliveries and free up a day. We spent it talking, laughing, and stealing playful kisses whenever we could. Every stop felt like an adventure, each moment tinged with a sense of newness I hadn't felt in years. That night I brought him over to my rig. We ended up in the cramped sleeping berth, tangled in each other once more. This time the pace was slower, almost reverent, like we were savoring every moment. It's incredible how, in just a short span, someone can go from complete stranger to feeling like the person you've been searching for all along. Over the next few days, we tried to meet whenever our routes intersected. Sometimes it worked, sometimes it didn't. But we exchanged numbers, pictures of the open road, and late-night voice notes when the distance felt too great. One afternoon at a rest area near Denver, Zach suggested something that made my heart pound. "Let's promise to be faithful," he said, looking me straight in the eye. "You and I both know how the road can offer distractions. But I don't want to risk this. What we have." I paused, thinking of how unexpected this had been, then I smiled and nodded. "I promise." In the nearly 2 years since that first encounter, we've grown closer than I ever thought possible. We've managed to hold true to our vow, even when miles and schedules pull us apart for weeks on end. Sure, there are lonely nights and moments where I miss him fiercely. But one call, one message from Zach, and it's like everything falls back into place. Now we talk about the future. About buying a small piece of land somewhere quiet, maybe near the mountains or by a lake, where we can build a life beyond the constant rumble of diesel engines. We dream of a home that belongs to us, where we can watch the sunrise together without worrying about the next delivery. Whenever I'm out on the highway, I think about Zach's crooked smile and how much my life has changed in such a short time. The miles slip by faster because I know there's someone at the other end of them who gives these journeys meaning. So if there's one thing I've learned, it's this: Don't be afraid to throw your whole heart into something, even if it happens in a moment. Life is too short to hold back your feelings, to hide the way someone lights you up inside. Because in the blink of an eye, you might find the person who'll share the rest of your journey. If you're eager to know more about this story, let us know in the comments and we'll bring you part 2. And if you enjoyed it, don't forget to hit the like button, share it with whoever you want, and subscribe so you don't miss what's coming next. Just like the road always holds surprises, stories can take you to places you never imagined. See you in the next one.